Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, in a typically outrageous move, one of India's most watched YouTubers, and of course the nemesis of the Khalistan movement, Major Araya, returns to demand Hindus pay the London Mafia to murder British Khalistanis in revenge for the so-called attack on Jaishankar. Why is he allowed to get away with breaking the law so frequently? Yet another gang rape in India, this time against a visiting tourist. And taking another look at India through the lens of democracy, we take a look at the ongoing press restrictions imposed by the Modi government. And as Canada finds itself with a new Prime Minister, we discuss the implications of Mark Carney. All this and more on today's show. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. Good to see you and good to see our audience out there. Once again, we love all of your amazing comments, so keep them rolling. We love to read them. Thanks. And back to you, Angus.
We certainly do. And James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, we will indeed be taking a look at loads of your great comments at the end of the show, so stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
As most people figured, and as we touched on quickly last night, it is official that Mark Carney is the official leader of the Liberal Party. That means that automatically, by default, he will be the one stepping in to fill the shoes of Justin Trudeau. As the time goes on here, we know that there is an important time right now to deal with international trade relations with the U.S. as well as the expansion of Canada's oil and gas industry as the pipeline from the oil sands and Alberta's oil fields has reached the west coast. Now, this is going to play into a lot of the strengths that are seen as a part of Carney being the leader. And he actually won by 85% of the vote, with the next even closest was Chrystia Freeland, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and Finance Minister. She came in at only 8% of the vote. So the mandate is very clear and the message very strong that they are placing their trust to move forward with the current situation to replace Justin Trudeau, and to bring Canada forward to the next stage. So we'll see how that works. But again, it's going to be very short-lived because at this time, of course, there is a mandatory election prior to October of this year. But it is anticipated that it's going to be a very short turnaround and that there will be an election call within the first month of Mark Carney stepping into the position to replace Justin Trudeau on his resignation. So again, we are expecting that an election will take place very quickly during the spring, and we'll have to move forward with that, Angus. So it's just a quick spin and quick change of events in this world of politics.
Yeah, interesting. And I've mentioned Mark Carney before because, of course, for those who might not know, Mark Carney was a former governor of the Bank of England for a period of time. And he was massively criticised during that time for various issues, not least the fact that he kept interest rates so low that he helped engender this enormous housing bubble. So house prices just soared as credit became so cheap, which has created all sorts of social issues. And he certainly has been credited, if that's the right word, with doing an awful lot of damage to the British economy. Now, one only needs to look at his background to raise concerns, I have to say, from the free democratic world. He is another child of the World Economic Forum. Yes, he's another one of these World Economic Forum alumni, let's call it. He's also got a background. If you look at his background, he's a former banker with Goldman Sachs. This is this investment bank that always seems to crop up with the world's elite. I only need to look at Macron as another alumni of Goldman Sachs. This investment bank that has made extraordinarily large amounts of wealth off the back of various global economies has spawned people like Mark Carney. These these are elite bankers who are now ending up running the world via the World Economic Forum. And again, you can be conspiratorial about it. It doesn't matter. The facts speak for themselves. People like Mark Carney are finding themselves with no political background or experience whatsoever now in charge of Canada. That raises my eyebrow enormously, because it makes me think, well, hang on, who actually are these guys? Where did he come from? He hasn't nurtured his career through politics or whatever. He's just suddenly appeared out of nowhere in the same way that Macron did in France, suddenly catapulted into these enormous powers, these enormous positions of power and influence. He now effectively controls Canada. I don't know, James. It always raises my democratic red alert alarm bells, because I think, hang on, who are these people that suddenly appear out of nowhere and now appear in these massively important positions? I don't know. As I say, you don't even need to be conspiratorial about it to raise an eyebrow, because, again, his background speaks for itself. His economic background is questionable, because he's been massively criticised after his tenure here in the UK. And suddenly, with no political background, he suddenly appears and now takes charge of Canada, coming from the banking and elite fraternity, coming from the World Economic Forum. Yeah, James, I am worried. What does it mean for the Sikh community? I don't know. I think only time will tell. At least, if nothing else, he has a chance of keeping Poilievre out. And we know Poilievre is certainly no friend at all of the Sikh community. But what does Mark Carney mean? I don't know, James.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see how he just kind of slithered in there, like a snake there. He just slithered right in. He has worked as a special envoy for environment and climate and all of that to the UN. But it's very interesting to look at one of his promises is to eliminate the climate tax that people have been very much upset with in Canada, and just really contribute that tax to a lot of the inflationary division that's going on in the country. So for him to bring that in, I think it's a sleight of hand. I think that he has other plans when he talks about, just different approaches to dealing with climate change and the environment. I think he's just going to basically bring in a hidden tax as opposed to this visual tax that people know about. So it's going to be interesting to watch whether or not he will be able to overcome the anger and the upset with Trudeau right now in the Liberal Party. I think that it is quite possible that they could right now, and I think that's one of the main reasons that they will call a quick election, is to really jump on the popularity of the party and the unpopularity of the Conservatives. The Conservatives have lost substantial ground when it comes to the polling and current situation in Canada, as Pierre Poilievre is seen as Trump's little parrot, or a Trump 2.0, or a Trump Light. There's so many different things they're calling him, the Maple Mega, just different things. So again, I think that's got a lot to do with why they're going to do a very quick turn on the election campaign. But with that, of course, with any election and concerns there, come the concerns of the media restrictions and media disinformation, the foreign interference, and all of those issues. And of course, we are talking more about India and their involvement in the freedom of the press that's not so free. We touched on this the other night where we just kind of brought that up, but I thought that we would just take another closer look for those who haven't really been too involved or aware of what's happening with the freedom of the press, or the lack thereof, in India. Some of the real issues that are complex and concerning when it comes to media input and media influence coming out of India is that the Indian Constitution guarantees freedom of speech and expression, but included in this freedom is what they call this subjected to reasonable restrictions. And I would like to say that most agencies, organizations, and even government agencies would say that the restrictions on the media in India and in terms of internationally from the government of India or their agencies such as RAW, the RSS, and so forth, the restrictions are way beyond what is considered reasonable, and that is a major concern for associations worldwide. Now, critics argue that these restrictions are increasingly being used to suppress dissenting voices. And again, that is not only within the borders of India, but around the world. Now, the different ways in which India is really putting these challenges to the journalists is the use of intimidation and violence. Journalists, particularly those critical of the government, face threats, harassment, and physical attacks. And that can be taken even a step further. And that includes friends of Narendra Modi and the BJP, the Hindutva, and the propaganda machines. If they are reporting that's counter to those narratives or just in an unfriendly light, then they can be targeted for violence, for death, and, so many other ways that they get around or get to the journalists. Legal actions, and that is laws such as sedition and those related to national security are sometimes used to target journalists. And we've gone over this so many times, Angus, that they basically charge them under the National Security Act and other different laws that they've brought in to dissent or to quiet dissent against any government or when it comes to khalistan. And when it comes to actually the freedom of that speech and the freedom of a diplomatic process and being able to have even a vote or a referendum on the subject, that is considered a threat against India and the sovereignty and the unity of the country. So they use all different laws that they bring in, not only historic laws that they misrepresent, but again, they bring in new laws to really target the journalists and others who speak out. Online harassment, again, they utilize the internet, social media, and so forth to threaten journalists, to abuse them, to make threats of violence. And we've even seen where they have manipulated images and sent them to families of different women in India purporting to be naked pictures or compromising pictures when they've actually been photoshopped. It's not even the real person that they've targeted, but it's enough to embarrass them, humiliate them, or to put pressure on them, because people, in a lot of ways, don't understand the power and the ability of computer manipulated photographs still. And that is just a humiliation for the family and the individual, regardless as to whether it is true video and images or not. When it comes to what they call the lawfare, and that's vague laws that are being used to censor journalism and media outlets that are critical of the ruling parties. If you look a few years ago, the BBC offices in India were raided. A lot of the journalists and staff there were held at the offices. The police agencies refused to let a lot of the journalists and the staff there at the BBC in India actually leave the offices. They had to stay there for days. While it was sorted out, there were accusations of income tax and other laws that were that were infractioned. And that really was a way for the government to crack down on the BBC in India. And it just so happened that when that raid did happen, it was just shortly after a documentary aired in the UK and in other BBC coverage areas that was really negative or cast a negative light on the BJP and Narendra Modi. So again, it shows how they utilize the laws to really battle war against the journalists and the journalism organizations. Now, in terms of surveillance, the possibility of surveillance through tools like spyware raise serious concerns about the source protection and journalistic safety. We've talked about this before, different software solutions that are out there to government and to intelligence agencies. And we know that some of them have come from Israel and Russia and all of these different bots, but also the spyware that goes into the system, records keystrokes and other information, just scrubs the computer and takes all of that data, copies it, and sends it to a third party server. So, for example, the government of of India server or their intelligence servers and so forth. So they surveil exactly what is being typed on that keyboard. And you may not think much of it, but if you have a journalist that is doing an investigative journalism story, now the government knows exactly what they've typed on that keyboard every time they've typed it, what they're sending out in emails, who they're sending them to. I mean, the reach is just so great and so wide that spyware can also be distributed through that system to all of the others. So, for example, if an independent journalist for the BBC was working at their home office or remote office, they log into the BBC Center, and now that access has been granted to the intelligence agency on the third-party system. So again, it is just far-reaching. It is, the spyware, the activity to monitor, restrict, and control journalism, Angus, is, something out of a James Bond movie almost.
It's terrifying, but it's also not surprising. I think one of the key words I picked out of that whole report was declining, the declining state of press freedom in India. This actually speaks volumes in that simple phrase because, India, okay, it's never been perfect. It's emerged from the British Empire, trying to establish itself as a new nation, etc. But at least it did establish a pretty effective press, a pretty effective reporting mechanism post-Britain, post-1947. Now, one of the key benchmarks of a democracy is its press, is its ability to hold the government, the ruling class, to account, is its ability to express free speech, its ability for the people to hold a lens up to the government, and if they think they're going wrong or they're going in the wrong direction, they're allowed to freely criticise that government and hold it to account and say, no, we don't agree with you, you need to change course. And the government cannot react violently or cannot react in any other way than listen or do something about it. They can choose to ignore it, but ultimately they can then be voted out. That's how a healthy democracy works. But in India, the key word here, declining, it implies a trend. The trend is very clear, certainly since 2014, when the BJP took power. The trend has been very clear, is that press freedom is declining. It's getting worse, which means that the rod of iron from the government is clamping down, is stamping down on anybody who dares criticise or holds the government to account. That is not the sign of a democracy. That is a sign of a totalitarian regime. We see this in North Korea. We see it in Russia. We see it in China. So all these well-known examples of non-democracies, this is what India is becoming fast, and the trend is very clear. Human Rights Watch, all these human rights organisations have been very vocal about it. They can't say it in India, of course, because they will get locked up, but they can certainly say it outside of India, and that's what they're saying. They're saying that India is in a terrible position. The Global Free Press Index has India 159th out of 180 countries. So India's so-called free press is actually sitting amongst North Korea and Russia and Iran and all these nations, again, that are known to be non-democracies. This is shameful. This isn't a democratic country. Regularly we talk about J&K. When they removed J&K's special status in 2019 and flooded J&K with troops, of course, all the local press agencies started going online and started producing their printed papers saying, this is outrageous. This is an affront to democracy. This is flying in the face of the Constitution. This is basically brutal totalitarian control. And what happened to all of them? They got closed down. The leaders got arrested, they got detained, they got intimidated, harassed by the police. Again, these are signs that you see in North Korea or Russia. You're not supposed to see this in India. And of course, you don't see this publicly in India because it's not reported. Why? Because it doesn't have a free press. It's only people like us, James, that have the freedom, because we live in democracies, we have the freedom to report on this. So again, this phrase, declining state of press freedom in India, this is what's scary, and this is why, and you only need to go on YouTube to look at the Indian Godi media, as it's called, to see how partisan, how pro-Modi it is, how anti-Sikh, anti-Khalistan it is. They froth at the mouth. They give every opportunity to stain and smear the Sikh community. Again, but where's the counter-narrative? People like us who would stand up for the Sikh community and actually tell the truth. Jai Shankar attack, a prime example of this. We're banned. We are banned from India, as are all the other outlets like us. And the Jai Shankar is a prime example of where this press freedom has become a joke in India, is that according to all the media in India, Jai Shankar, in his visit to London a few days ago, he was physically attacked by Khalistani terrorists. Well, you look across in any Indian media, you try and find the truth. The truth was, well, you watch our show from the other day where we showed the video where one of the protesters stood in front of his car and ripped an Indian flag in half in front of the car. There was no physical attack. That was a simple democratic protest. That was the truth, but you will not see that truth in India, James. And that, in a nutshell, sums up the problem with India. India is not a democracy, plain and simple.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, there's such a concentration of ownership when it comes to the media, not only television, but print and even the newer age media. We see it all the time when the internet is saturated with these so-called legitimate, and I use that word very lightly, these legitimate Indian, news sources online, and they use things like CNN 18, and there's all these different sites that look legitimate, but they're actually just again part of the India machine there. And when you bring up, about us being banned in terms of our show in India, but it's also, if you look at the comment section of our show, how many people have said, oh, you're brave, or, we hope you're safe and all of that, because it's not uncommon for the Indian government to target journalists or reporters overseas and in foreign nations to try to target them, make threats, or even take it a step further to violence. And we've seen it happen where people have mysteriously disappeared or, had threats and violence against them. And you look at Russia, how many people that spoke out against Putin have mysteriously fallen out of hotel windows, some of them that don't even open. So, you make fun of it, but at the same time, it's a very serious, very, very serious issue. And to finalize that is that the, telecommunication systems and the internet often get shut down in places like J&K and, anywhere else that the government sees a lot of activity of the negative the news that comes out and puts them in a negative light. So they will, shut down the communication. They'll shut down the internet. They'll shut down access to social media. So it's not uncommon, Angus, and that's, just some of the ways that they control the media, not only within the borders of India, but also, externally around the world. Some people that report and talk about it are, they are easily intimidated because they have families or such. Whereas, we probably just don't have the same common sense to worry about it.
Yeah, well, we live in a democracy, James, and we take for granted the fact we live in a democracy. And there are countless stories of journalists across India who literally have the police knocking down their doors, intimidating them, harassing them, detaining them for days at a time, simply for criticising the Modi government. It's an absolute outrage, and people really need to be made aware of it. And talking of propaganda and the Modi, the Godi machine, in fact, I'd refer our audience to some of the interviews I've done with Bhajan Singh Binder particularly, who's done an awful lot of research into that media machine that feeds this misinformation across the Indian media, the propaganda. It's absolutely enormous, it's complex, and it does effectively stem from the Hindutva propaganda machine. So do go watch some of those. But as I was saying, talking about the Godi media, well, one of his greatest in terms of viewership, his mouthpieces, is a guy called Major Araya. Yes, this is the nemesis of the Sikh, and particularly the Khalistan movement. Major Gaurav Araya is once again taking to YouTube, and this guy has a massive following. He's got something like 3.2 million subscribers on his channel. He is a former army major from the Indian Army, and he spouts on a regular basis obviously pro-Modi propaganda, but certainly anti-Khalistan propaganda. And he's after I was talking about the Jaishankar visit to London a few days ago, and that so-called attack, which was of course not an attack, it was just a simple protest by a few guys with Khalistan flags. As a result of that gentleman standing in front of Jaishankar's car and ripping the Indian flag in half, he's actually gone on YouTube. There's been a couple of videos he's released in the last couple of days, which have been an absolute outrage. And if these were released in the UK, or certainly in any Western nation, he would now be under arrest and probably behind bars, because it would break every law that exists in any normal democratic nation. So it was basically a radical rallying cry from him. And he himself, I mean, this guy is no angel. He himself is currently facing accusations of rape and murder, but he did refer to this protest against Dr. Jaishankar. But his past record also includes, and this is why people actually in the Sikh community are particularly concerned, because in the past, in 2023, he claimed that Avtar Singh Kandar would soon be eliminated, just 2 months before he actually was, he died under very suspicious circumstances, and it is believed he was actually poisoned by Raw. Now, this protest against Jaishankar, of course, as we reported the other day on, it was basically against Jaishankar's appearance and his involvement in transnational oppression, of course, which has included the murders of Nijjar in Canada, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and the attempted murder of Gurbatant Singh Panoon in New York. Now, his latest rant began with an accusation directly, weirdly, towards the UK's Labour government, claiming that they orchestrated the attack on Dr. Jaishankar, which, I mean, itself, I'm chuckling because it's a farce, really, to make that accusation. But it does highlight how ridiculous this guy is. I mean, there's absolutely no way the UK government would orchestrate that attack, because arguably, as I often say, the UK government has a very good relationship. In fact, I would almost say too good relationship with the Indian government. That has been the biggest problem in the Sikh community. So there's no way that they would orchestrate this. So again, farcical. But but of course, as we said, there was no attack. It was simply one guy who stood in front of the car and tore an Indian flag in half. But you look at the Godi media, and it was a terrorist attack. It was Jaishankar was physically attacked by terrorists in London. I mean, it was so outrageous. Anyway, but Araya's call for on his YouTube video included, he said statements like, "This world is not your family" to Hindus. "Only India should be important to them." So again, he's known as a Hindu extremist, as a right-wing extremist, a nationalist. And so what he said again in this video is saying, look, the only world that matters to you is our Hindu Rashtra. And Hindu places of worship, and he predicted that Hindu places of worship will be attacked in the UK. Again, following this same theme that where the Mandirs in Canada have been attacked allegedly by Khalistan terrorists, and in fact they weren't. They just had protesters outside. But we've also seen it in Australia, these false flag graffiti attacks, which in fact were actually perpetrated by Hindus themselves, but they were blamed on Khalistanis. Again, deliberate false flag attacks. And he's now predicting that in the UK, Mandirs are going to be attacked by terrorists again, by Khalistani terrorists. He said, Hindus, get this, should buy guns, as the UK government will not protect them without a right-wing government. And he reiterated calls for anyone supporting Khalistan to be banned from India, and their families in India to be targeted with violence too. Again, it's just absolutely outrageous what he's saying. He also talked about Bob Blackman. This is an MP, a British MP who we talked about. He's an absolutely outrageous Hindutva supporting MP here in the UK, and another guy, a government faith advisor, Colin Bloom, who the pair of them constantly parrot this Indian nationalist nonsense, and they also likewise parroted the claims of a so-called attack on Jaishankar. And again, we talked about how Blackman is actually been on the payroll of Hindutva, or the RSS, through various organisations. Now, Hindutva has grown in the UK, as we've often reported. It has become an area of concern. Arya himself did tour the UK in 2017, and he claimed he spoke to Oxford University, one of our leading universities, and King's College in Cambridge, again one of our leading universities. On that tour, he was a celebrated guest. They feted him, and again he spouted loads of Indian nationalism. And of course, he was, of course, a guest of Bob Blackman. Now, Bob Blackman is actually the MP for Harrow East, which is an area known as the mini Gujarat of the UK. Gujarat, of course, is the birthplace of people like Narendra Modi, etc., and Amit Shah, the Home Minister in India. And during the evening in Oxford, he was openly celebrated by Lord Rami Ranger, yes, another Hindutva supporter who was recently stripped of his CBE. That's an award that the British government awarded him, and in the end had to strip him of it because of his nefarious activities. And former senior Conservative MP Sajid Javid, again, who's often been seen photographed alongside Gaurav Araya. And Ranger himself has also openly threatened violence towards UK Sikhs, critical of India. Now, Araya is a problem because he has 3.6 million subscribers. He is one of the most viewed Indian political commentators, even though he stands actually accused of, for example, of rape of his former maid and murdering her husband when he complained about the abuse. He's a former army major, so as such he's seen as somebody who allegedly provides some sort of authentic insight into the nationalist pseudo-security policies of the Indian state, mainly on the basis of targeting minorities cited as anti-national. So basically he's leveraging his position as a former army officer to almost give some sort of credibility to what he says, and it's absolute nonsense. And what is concerning is that he's followed on X by Narendra Modi, no less. And of course, most of his stuff that he spouts is anti-Sikh, is pro-Modi. He is a Hindu extremist nationalist. Basically, he's dangerous. He's also called for India to fund criminals in the past in the USA. I remember we reported again on this about a year or so ago. He demanded that criminals in the USA should be funded by Hindus in India to attack Sikhs, to drag them out of their homes and beat them up and murder them. He also bragged about influencing Canada's right wing and even threatened world-renowned Nobel Peace Prize nominated UK-based Sikh humanitarian Ravi Singh, one of our most high-achieving, high-profile, charity-running Sikhs. Ravi Singh, of all people, again, somebody who is the least biggest threat to any form of government or humanity. So this guy is dangerous, James, and if he spouted stuff like this in the UK and certainly across North America, he would be under a charge of inciting violence. And here he is again, inciting violence against British Sikhs. He's done it against US Sikhs. He's now doing it against British Sikhs. This guy is a danger. He is a mouthpiece of the Modi government, but more importantly, he's a mouthpiece of the RSS extremists. This guy should be behind bars. He should not be allowed on YouTube. I don't see YouTube banning his channel, but they've certainly demonetized ours, James. Again, we know why. It's because the Indian agents of RAW have managed to infiltrate big tech, as we often say. That's why we're demonetized. But Major Gaurav's channel, 3.2 million subscribers, but I don't see him being removed or banned or whatever from YouTube.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's face it, it's a sad state when they allow this to continue and to perpetrate it. And they utilize some of these channels just because they are popular and they're bringing in more viewers. And, and there is a lot of Indians, Hindutva and other Indians that work for these tech companies, and they allow them to continue. But I think that the government and their media machine also uses these workers to really suppress the voice of the Khalistan movement and of Sikhs in general and other minorities, both inside and outside of India. And when you look at the international speeches that that individuals like this, come out to say and to spew their hatred and their divisiveness, whether it is on the college and university speaker circuits or to speak on, at events with foreign MPs and MLAs and, Congress people and such, there is a lack of forethought or a lack of screening of these speakers. And I think that that's where we're starting to see some changes, a bit more in-depth background checks of people who are speaking and being paid with public dollars, Angus.
Indeed. And you were talking about freedom of press in India. And let's turn this around. Let's say you and I, James, were now residing in Amritsar. And we'd launched our channel on YouTube, and we started demanding that the Sikh community should start murdering Hindus, or the Sikh community should fund criminals to murder Hindus. What do you think would happen to us? I think that's pretty predictable.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying. It's it wouldn't last long for us, especially being the pale skinned white guys that would be just disappearing somewhere.
I think we would be sharing a jail cell with Amritpal Singh with before the sun set on that same day. In other words, it's complete nonsense that the fact that this guy can get away with broadcasting this dangerous, inciting violent criminal activity. This is basically, it's criminal more than anything else. He can get away with it in India, but we're not allowed to. Neither is anybody else in India. Nobody's allowed to, never mind do this, but not even criticise the Indian government. Talking about the Indian government, James, one of the key areas that we criticise that government on a regular basis, and this is an absolute, this is just a stain. This is a shame on the nation of India as a whole, and really the buck stops with Narendra Modi. This is once again sexual assaults occurring in India, and this time this was reported in one of our main news outlets here in the UK, and in fact a right-wing outlet who would normally certainly not attack India, but they reported this dreadful attack that occurred in Karnataka in India. It was a tourist has been sexually assaulted. In fact, was gang raped. Let's call it what it was gang raped. As she toured stargazing. She was an astronomer of all people. She was just went for a peaceful trip to India to look at the stars, and she found herself gang raped. So the story was, she was a 27-year-old woman. She was Israeli. She was on a stargazing excursion in Koppal town in southern Karnataka state, with her female host and 3 male travellers, when 3 men attacked the group. Now, the 3 attackers threw the male travellers, they were an American and 2 Indians, into the canal. And one of the tourists, an Indian male, drowned, sadly. So one of them died just immediately as he was thrown into the canal. His body was recovered. The other 2 swam to safety. Meanwhile, the Israeli woman and her host were brutally beaten and raped before the attackers fled the scene. As she said, I was bleeding heavily. 2 of the attackers joined forces, dragged me to the side of the canal. One of them strangled me, removed my clothes. One after another, they beat me and raped me. That was the Indian lady. The Israeli tourist was unable to provide a quote for obvious reasons. What happened was that one of the men demanded 100 rupees, that's about $1. She said, they didn't know us, so I told them I didn't have any money, but they kept demanding and demanding until one of the male tourists gave them 20 rupees. An argument ensued when the tourists refused to give any more money, and the suspects threatened the group before pushing the men into the canal and then hitting them with stones, as well as raping and beating the women. Now, the Indian Prime Minister did actually refer indirectly to this. Well done, Mr. Modi, for actually speaking up. He said he did not address the gang rape attack directly, but he did say on International Women's Day at the weekend, there's a farce in India, when a daughter comes home late, her parents ask questions. They don't ask similar questions when a son comes home late. Over the past decade, we have prioritised women's safety and security. To stop crimes against women, we have changed laws and established the death penalty for heinous acts like rape. Well, clearly, Mr. Modi, it's not working. Sexual assaults on women have become more commonplace in India, where police recorded more than 31,000 cases of rape in 2022, a 20% increase from the year before. And actually, it's believed the true figure may be a lot higher due to the stigma surrounding sexual assaults. And of course, we do know that the lower caste Dalit women regularly suffer sexual assault, and of course they are too scared to report it. So the number will be massively higher than the official statistics. And of course, acts of rape and sexual violence have been under scrutiny since a well-publicised gang rape of a 23-year-old student, Jyoti Singh, on a New Delhi bus in 2012. That hit the mainstream news right across the world. It was an absolutely outrageous gang rape of a poor young lady on a bus, a public bus of all places. And last year, in a video that was later deleted, a Spanish tourist said his wife was raped in northern India, while an Indian-American woman said she was raped at a hotel in New Delhi in 2022, and a British tourist was raped in front of her partner in Goa. So again, these are just British tourists and foreign tourists. So again, it's not just Indian women, it's even tourist females to India who are being sexually assaulted. James, this is an absolute shameful stain on India as a nation. This problem is not going away, despite Modi saying, oh, I'm doing everything to stop it. And yeah, okay, you brought in the death penalty, but it's not just the death penalty that's sorting this out. This problem is getting worse. There was a 20% increase. The trend is going massively in the wrong direction. As we often say, James, and sadly we often report on this terrible situation in India, women are treated not just second-class citizens, as third-class citizens in India. They are treated as meat. They are treated as targets. They are treated as people who are just there to be sexually assaulted. Even a doctor was raped and murdered recently, James. This is how bad it is in India. What is Narendra Modi doing about it? It isn't enough, whatever he's doing. It requires a massive re-education campaign right down to the level of schools. Children need to be educated. The caste system needs to be got rid of, because that is one of the fundamental pieces of infrastructure that allows sexual assault to occur on a regular basis. It is too deeply embedded in Indian culture. This is India to a T, James. It's an absolute national shame.
It is, Angus, and look at how many times the women are blamed when they go to the police stations, or they are victimized by police officers. It's disgusting. And even if you go to Travel Canada, they warn Canadians that are going to India to use extreme caution in all areas. Be aware of where you are. And one of the areas that they focus on is that women are subject to an increasing level of sexual and other assaults there. And they say that can happen anywhere, including the tourist sites and areas. Attackers also sometimes act as a group. So it doesn't mean that if you see a group of people, you're safe. It's, not just the individuals creeping around the dark alleys. It's anywhere that it could be a problem. And they say that you should be particularly vigilant in areas of Goa, of Delhi, and other areas, but on even public transportation, in yoga centers, ashrams, and other spiritual retreats. I mean, it's just unbelievable that these are places that the governments are warning you to be very careful of because of the increased level of assaults and sexual violence and harassment. They say don't be alone at night. Be extremely vigilant on public transportation, taxis, and auto rickshaws. Be careful when dealing with strangers and new acquaintances. Be wary of accepting snacks or beverages because they could be spiked. Be careful of less populated areas, and respect local customs and dress codes, and reach the police if you feel threatened. And they also go as far, Angus, as to say that if you are subjected or victimized in India, after you reach out to the local police, to also reach out to your consulate or your embassy representatives right away, because they can help to ensure that you're not re-victimized by the agencies that are supposed to be protecting you.
Yeah, it's as I say, it's a national shame. And if you spend any time looking at the Hindutva extremists, the right-wing extremist social media, one of the main themes that they pursue is anti-Islam. They spend half their lives criticising the dangers of Islam and how Islam treats its women. Women must be covered up, etc. Well, unfortunately, I don't see many Islamic women or rape or gang rape being a problem in the Islamic world. Certainly, it most certainly is not. Because in the Islamic world, if you so much as disrespect a woman, you find yourself missing body parts pretty rapidly. So that's why they don't have a problem. They don't have a sexual assault problem in any Islamic country. I do see that in India. So I would say to the Hindutva extremists, look at your own house, get your own house in order before you start criticising other religions. Because certainly it is a national problem in India. It is internationally recognised that sexual assault, gang rapes, which is one of the most heinous crimes that exists in any modern society. It is prevalent. It is endemic in India. How often have we reported about gang rapes? It's an absolute, as I say, it's an absolute national shame. Anyway, James, let us move on in the interest of time into our comments section. Right, I did a very interesting interview, discussion with Dr. Singh Grewal last week. We talked about Shahid Jaswant Singh Kalra. This, the thumbnail speaks for itself. He was a true hero. He was murdered by Indian police, Punjab police. Yes, another extrajudicial killing because of what he did, which was highlight the fact that over 25,000 young Sikhs had been extrajudicially killed themselves in the Punjab. He collected that information. It was a fascinating story. Do watch that podcast with Dr. Singh Grewal, where he talks about the whole story of what happened to Jaswant Singh Kalra. And the fact that he started investigating it when he was working in a bank in Amritsar, and his colleagues started disappearing one by one. He thought, what's going on here? And he started digging in, and he discovered, first of all, that all the evidence had been buried. It was very hard to find out where they'd gone. They just literally vanished. So what he did, he went to the crematoria, and he got the crematoria records and discovered that it was there was loads of people young Sikh men who had been cremated, who were orphaned. There was no family, allegedly. And in fact, of course, they were the missing, they were the disappeared. So he started collating that evidence. It was the indirect evidence that then pointed to this mass murder of Sikhs. And he himself, sadly, ended up being murdered himself by the Punjab police. So do watch that podcast. And Tardal Singh clearly appreciated it. Thank you for inviting Dr. Grewal. In All About by Jaswant Singh Kalra, he was a great hero and not forgotten by the Sikhs. And as Sukhwinder Chahal says, like many others, Jaswant Singh Kalra ji, yeah, it was the guy. I mean, we must never forget his legacy. I reported a couple of weeks ago how a school in the United States has been renamed as Jaswant Singh Kalra, Shahid Jaswant Singh Kalra, after this great figure. We must never forget what he did, and most importantly, we must never forget his legacy and what he highlighted, which is, of course, with the mass extrajudicial killings of young Sikhs in the Punjab in the 1980s, James.
And it's really quite an honor, especially these days. There's a lot of we've seen, the woke or the DEI and all of these different movements going on. But what people don't speak about is that a lot of these schools have been renamed out of the biggest demands by local community, and there's less and less, I think, of a narrative to name schools and public buildings after individuals. So that makes it even more important and more of an honor, I would think, that they've gone forward with this naming of the school. So again, I commend them for that, and feel that it really reached out to the local community to give them a voice, a name, and recognition, Angus.
Indeed, and we will certainly do our bit going forward to keep the name of people like Shahid Jaswant Singh Kalra alive and never forgotten.
Yeah.
TC said, great reporting as always, James and Angus. Thank you once again for your comments, as you do comment regularly. Thank you for those. The enemy within, this is the key point in your comment. The enemy within is being exposed every day, and their nefarious activities. This is important, this point, because yes, James, it is our job with what we do on a daily basis is to highlight this enemy within, because Hindutva is the enemy within. The RSS, they have infiltrated so many organisations, so many areas of academia, politics, or whatever. It must be highlighted to the general public that this is the enemy that has managed to sneak in nefariously within academia and organisations and influence politics, influence academia, influence education, all these things. It is a danger to democracy, and it is insidious, James. It is our job to keep highlighting the enemy within, as TC rightly says.
Absolutely, and I think that that's somewhere one of the unintended consequences to Narendra Modi and the RSS and Raw agency with the extrajudicial killings, the transnational repression, is that it's created such a spotlight on this problem that now people are starting to see that, the atrocities that have happened towards the Sikh community and other minorities. So it's shining that light, magnifying, what the Hindutva is all about, what they've been doing, and how they've, been involved in activities around the world. So I think that that's one of the unintended, consequences of what Modi and his government's been up to.
Indeed. And I dipped into our shorts. I don't often go into our shorts section of our videos. Because the first comment from Avtar Dillon says, "Good work, Angus. Where's James?" Well, this is a good question. Let me explain. The shorts, our editors, our editing team who edit the shorts, they go into our perspectives program, and they just take very short sections out of perspectives. So, for example, when you see a short video where I'm talking, James is actually there. It's just he's just not happened to be selected on that particular short. So that's why, if you want to see James, dip into our perspectives, the full show, because the shorts are really just short selections from our big show, which is the perspective show. So James, you've been missed on the shorts.
Absolutely, and that's fine with me. But I think that some of it as well has got to do with the AI. I'm not sure what system is used for the pulling of the shorts. I know that there are some programs that will automatically extract shorts from the show, and they're looking for certain keywords and such as well. So sometimes it's automated, and that's the way it works. As long as you as the audience are enjoying the shorts and it gets you to tune into the full program, then we're good with it.
Exactly. So, in other words, you're better off watch the full programme than you get the full story. Peace Lovers says, the world should understand what is the condition of Indian media, politics and people's voices and democracy. Well, James, we couldn't put it better. We've already talked about at great length, indeed, about all that, haven't we?
Exactly. Just very, very topical and timely.
And Hap B, this is quite a concerning comment. They're shooting and arresting young Sikh boys in Punjab every day. And of course, we even had the commenter yesterday whose brother sadly was murdered likewise, extrajudicially murdered. And it clearly is. There is a pattern forming there, James. It points to the fact that, as Hap B says, they are shooting and arresting young Sikh boys. This is a throwback to the 1980s.
Absolutely, and let's not forget that that's where they are also sending a lot of the immigrants being returned from the U.S. They're sending a lot of other people there, and it's to try and detract from the focus of the community and the credibility of the state of Punjab. So again, you've got to reach out. You've got to teach the young that don't let them get in your head and cause the violence. Don't give them a reason to act out violently against you in the name of what they call, gang activity or whatever. There's a lot of false narratives that they use to excuse the shooting of young Sikhs.
And the problem is actually finding out the truth of what actually happens in these situations. And again, we talk about the lack of freedom of press in India. Is of course a lot of these things when they happen, these murders of young Sikh boys in Punjab, they don't get reported, or if they do, they're dressed up in a completely false encounter, is the phrase often used. And even when we try to research stories, you try and get corroborating information from India itself, it's impossible because, again, the Indian media is not not free. It is not reporting the truth. It's just some manufactured fabrication to suit the Modi agenda. It's impossible to get genuine, true news and information out of India. That makes life extremely hard when you want to corroborate a story. So yeah, it's very sad and very worrying. Now, one of our regular contributors, Danny, he's been really piling into the comments. Thank you, Danny, for all your contributions. And I think Danny did say he was a Hindu by background. And he's made a lot of I say it's he, I don't know, it's a he, it's a big assumption, but let's assume it's a he, Danny. Made a load of very lengthy contributions, so thank you for those. And you say, the UK economy down, does Scotland get independence? Well, the point is we've given them the opportunity to go independent. We actually had a referendum, but I don't see any referendum in Punjab happening. That is the whole point. So when people, our critics, say, what about Scotland? Well, yeah, we often say Scotland was given a referendum. That's what happens in a democracy, that if an area wants to break away, like Quebec, they get referenda to vote for that. Will California Sikhs help Cal-exit? In other words, California exiting independence from the US? Well, again, yes, California, if there was support for a referendum, it would be given a referendum. That's how democracy works. And likewise, you refer to Catalan, etc. Well, Catalans are slightly... In fact, I would actually criticise the European Union. That's actually why Britain left the European Union, because we questioned the democratic credentials of the EU. Because, for example, Catalan was actually being denied its democratic rights, etc. So that's again, that is quite an interesting one to use, etc., etc. But then this was followed up with Daily Jet Daily, who finally responded to a whole ream of Danny comments, and said, look, this Danny RSS operative is scared of Sikh history and wisdom. Under Ranjit Singh, of course, and the Sikh Empire, the British were even too scared to come and attack the Ranjit Singh's kingdom area because it was so powerful and so effective. Read history. Either baptize Christianity, as your name, Danny or Daniel, that's a Christian name, I believe, it is a Christian name, as your name suggests, or Baptiste Amrit of Sikhs. Choice is yours, Danny. Well, Daily Jet Daily, thank you for your comment. I don't know if Danny is an RSS operative. Who knows? But certainly, Danny, we do appreciate all your contributions. We might not agree with them, which is great, because that is what we're all about. We're open to freedom of speech. We're open to a good debate, James. Are we not?
Absolutely. And let's face it, I mean, right now with Canada-US divide, there are people in Alberta who are saying, Alberta should join the US. If they wanted to do that and have a referendum, we'd say, all right, no problem, go at it, have a referendum. We'd support it. And, we are pretty confident it would never happen. But at the same time, we would be more than happy to let them have that, as, that's just the way it is. It's all about allowing that freedom, and that freedom of expression, and that freedom of having a voice. And that's what the referendums are all about, no matter where they're at. So, and what they're about.
Exactly. And unfortunately, the Hindu majority in India, who are so influenced and indoctrinated by the Gaudiya media, they just don't really get they don't understand how democracy should actually work, because they have been indoctrinated with this RSS version of democracy, which is far from genuine democracy. The final set of comments refer to our really the great news that filtered out of India last week. This was the case of Jaggi, where one of his 9 cases against him was basically thrown out of court. And as KP Singh says, this decision on Jaggi came when the so-called External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, was in the UK. Is there something to read between the lines? Bottom line is, there are 8 more such cases thrust on him. May Akal Purat bless him. Yeah, so there's a question here. Was the visit of Dr. Jaishankar to the UK, was that linked to the fact that one of these cases was thrown out? I don't know. Maybe there is. Well, I have no doubt there probably is an awful lot going on behind the scenes between the British and Indian government. Ultimately, the British and Indian governments want to get along. They want trade deals because that is actually in the best interests of both nations. The whole Sikh issue is actually, with all due respect to the community, it's a minor issue. It's a pain. It's a thorn in the side, but it's tiny in comparison to the main issues, which is, of course, is international commerce. Dollars matter more than than human rights, as we know. It's a sad fact of life, as we often report and complain about. But ultimately, that is what really matters to the British government and to the Indian government. But that is not to say that things like Jaggi's case, which really, as I say, and I often say, is a thorn in the side for both governments, because there's people like us becoming a thorn in the side, hopefully, of the British and Indian governments, because we keep raising it. We keep stabbing them and prodding them, saying, look, what about Jaggi? What about Jaggi? And it becomes an irritation to the politicians. So hopefully in the end they think, okay, we're going to have to do something about this. And so hopefully, yes, maybe a lot has happened behind the scenes, James. Hopefully, that one of these cases was thrown out. I'd like to think that it was actually Indian justice, finally, a judge who has looked at the case and said, look, this is a joke, this is a farce, this is not justice. Of course, Jaggi's done nothing wrong. We all know he's a political prisoner. Hopefully, really, is justice doing what it should do. But in fact, I suspect a lot did go on behind the scenes, James.
And it's very slow, Angus, but it is slowly progressing. That judges are starting to make their intentions known to start holding the state and the federal governments to account when it comes to cases such as Jaggi's, when it comes to tax-related issues. And it's just really spreading, I think, more and more, but very slowly still. Don't get me wrong. It's not something that's happening overnight. But there seems to be a transition of the judges saying that's enough of this crap of this, year in and year out and year in delays when there is no case to be had against individuals, including those against Jaggi.
Indeed, and humanity follows the story by saying it is a welcome development, but there is a long way to go. Still 8 more cases. And you have little faith in an Indian judicial system when it concerns Sikhs, and I think that is true. Yeah, we do know how Sikhs have been targeted by the Indian. Well, the Indian justice system is just a tool. It's a tool being used by the state, but it's a tool used that should be impartial. It's not impartial, and it is being politicised and used against the Sikh community. And as Reckless Mohi says, the Indian government, embroiled in many cases, Jaggi has not yet given up. The Indian government has not given up. It is going to continue to target Sikh cases. But that is why, James, we on this channel will not give up. We will continue to highlight these cases and fight the cause of people like Jaggi, like Amritpal Singh, and the many others like them, and of course the whole community as a whole. We will continue to hopefully provide our small voice in fighting against this oppressive Indian government, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And like you said earlier, we could go over to India to be there directly to report, but then we would become cellmates probably just because we are members of the media.
Indeed, absolutely right. But as we often say, we are not anti-India. We just anti these Hindu extremists, these RSS extremists, unfortunately. So, but much as we would love to go visit India and enjoy the culture and the lovely people there. So, but anyway, on that note, we must finish Perspectives for another day. But please don't forget to keep these comments coming in. Thank you all, as always, for so many great comments that have been pouring in. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satellitetv.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention directly. But in the meantime, that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching Perspectives. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.